So 81 laps, a total distance of 306 kilometers or 190 miles. And look at that heat coming from the engines. We are waiting for the green flag. There it is, Nigel Mansell leaving black lines off the dummy grid. Is everybody getting away safely? So everybody taking up their original grid positions. Yes, they are. All 26 cars are safely on the parade lap, led by 1992 world champion Nigel Mansell.
And this is a Grand Prix of which there could be very many firsts. We could see emerge the first German world champion. We could also see the first father-son world championship. Graham Hill, of course, champion in 62 and 68. Can Damon be the first son of a world champion to, in his own right? That would be, I think, probably the most outstanding achievement of any here this afternoon.
And John, could be the first time Nigel Mansell wins here.
Well, that would be also, I think, for Nigel very important, but the father-son thing to me would be truly fantastic. McLaren International, they haven't won a race in a Grand Prix since 1981. Are they going to leave Adelaide with a 0 record in 1994? So it could also be the first Grand Prix win for a team that hasn't won a Grand Prix, or it could be the first Grand Prix win for a driver who's never won a Grand Prix, or it could be the first win for Benetton in their Constructors' Championship, and it goes on and on and on. But one thing's for sure, there are going to be multiple pit stops in this last Grand Prix of 1994. Now, how many stops Williams are going to make, how many stops Benetton make, we don't know, and as Allard has said, this is the most closely guarded secret of all the 94 season. But I would anticipate that the first stops are liable to come slightly earlier than later, because track conditions are different from those on Friday, and the more laps that cars do, the more rubber goes down, and therefore the less tyre wear we're going to get. So I would expect to see people like Schumacher, with that thought in mind, taking the initiative and coming in early rather than later.
Nigel Mansell leading the rest of the field back onto the start-finish straight, which is going into the Ayrton Senna chicane. Nigel Mansell on the left now. Many of us, including John and myself, have actually argued whether the left-hand side of the circuit is right. Now Nigel is on the grid, his car pointing in the right direction. Michael Schumacher to his right, Damon Hill right behind him, Mika Häkkinen, Rubens Barrichello and Eddie Irvine. We are waiting for the green flag at the back of your screen. Once that is there, that means once Mimo Sciatterella's car is stationary, that'll be waved. Then the 5-second board will go on. The sun comes out here in Adelaide. The red light is on and we are racing for the last time in this season, and Nigel Mansell, a great start, but Michael Schumacher takes the lead. Schumacher takes the lead, or is it Damon Hill? It's Schumacher who leads from Hill.
And we've had so far everybody cleanly through the new Ayrton Senna. Christian Fittipaldi, another Brazilian, has to take a shortcut, but look at the cars from left to right, right to left. But Michael Schumacher from the second row or second grid position took, and Nigel Mansell is off the track already, has gone wide. Rubens Barrichello has gone past him, but Michael Schumacher got the dream start. Damon Hill, a great start from the second row, but really the problem of not being in the front row of the grid is the reason why Damon Hill, you can see the gap, probably almost 2 seconds, and we're only halfway around this first lap of 81.
Michael Schumacher leads Damon Hill, Mika Häkkinen, Rubens Barrichello, Nigel Mansell, Jean Alesi, Eddie Irvine, Martin Brundle, and then it's Johnny Herbert.
And really a great start from Rubens Barrichello. He was fifth on the grid. He saw what happened to Mansell. He took full advantage. He showed no mercy whatsoever to Nigel Mansell. That reflects back to Jerez, the European Grand Prix, where he had a little battle going on for a long time, and he said afterwards, Nigel Mansell knows I'm not a boy.
Schumacher completes lap number 1 after 1 minute and 22 seconds. That is 2.1 seconds ahead of Damon Hill. Now, we can talk about pit stops very early on indeed. We can talk about pit stops during the whole Grand Prix here in Adelaide. But John, if Michael is on more stops than Hill, then he does need a big gap.
Well, the first lap he was 2.1 seconds quicker than Damon in second place. Again, an indication to the kind of fuel load Michael Schumacher's car is carrying. Schumacher, to take advantage of a multiple pit stop strategy, has got to be able to get ahead and draw out such a... Look, the acceleration. Mansell, of course, trying to block Schumacher, but that was just the difference between a good start and a mediocre start from Nigel Mansell. Damon slid through. Nigel did not squeeze him at all. That was good teamwork from Nigel Mansell. But now Damon really... Oh, and look at Mansell squeezing Barrichello. Now there's an aggressive move. Mansell, very unhappy indeed, runs wide. Barrichello cuts back across the front. We've got real motor racing in Adelaide for the first time. This is what we wanted to see all year, and I hope we're going to see it for some 79 remaining laps.
And of course, Nigel Mansell again being involved. The gap. Damon Hill is shown on our computer as being a race leader. Can we see the pictures, please, to confirm that? I don't think that is true. So Damon Hill lap was quicker than Michael Schumacher's lap, but we are with Nigel Mansell. I can't see out of my commentary booth to see what is happening here. It must be Schumacher still leading. I think my screen is wrong, but who knows?
Well, until this lap is completed, it may well be that somebody has considered the start from Michael Schumacher was a little bit in anticipation of the lights, but it didn't look that to us. Clearly on the road, Michael Schumacher is leading, but Damon Hill recording now quickest lap, and the return now back to the start finish. This final very quick flat out right hand corner, hard on the brakes. This was the scene back in 1992 where Senna ran into the back of Nigel Mansell, to the disgust of Nigel Mansell, and Senna just walked away and didn't share any thoughts whatsoever. Schumacher leading,
yeah.
Damon Hill, and the gap is down to 0.2 of a second, so Damon has had a blistering third lap.
So Damon is countering Michael Schumacher's moves on those first couple of kilometers in this deciding Grand Prix in 1994. The difference is 1.839 seconds. He was 0.2 of a second slower on that lap, but he has got Michael's got fastest lap with that 17.880. Häkkinen still third, some 7 seconds behind the race leader. Then is Rubens Barrichello. Nigel Mansell's fifth. John Alesi is sixth, and in seventh place it's Eddie Irvine, Martin Brundle, Johnny Herbert and Heinz-Harald Frentzen complete the top 10. Herbert actually fell back after a clash with Eddie Irvine on that opening lap.
Well, Damon Hill trying to keep focused, trying to keep Michael Schumacher in sight. The worst thing for Damon Hill at this point is to lose sight, and as the lap, different parts of the lap, longer bits of straight, you've got him in vision. But now across the lap, fourth time, 1.896 is the difference. And then so 8.5 seconds before we had Mika Häkkinen, and then Rubens Barrichello in fourth, Mansell still fifth, John Alesi in the first, of the Ferraris in sixth.
And Schumacher and Hill being a class of their own, as they have been for the last couple of Grand Prix. I mean, the boys are desperately going quick. 1:17.965 for Schumacher, 1:18.022 for Hill, and then the rest of the field, John, in the high 19s and low 20s and higher.
Well, this is a battle for the championship crown. The two people who are first and second are the two people who were there to win it. One of them is going to be happy, one of them is going to be disappointed, but one thing is for sure, from what we have seen, they both want it desperately.
So at the end of lap 5, Michael Schumacher leads Damon Hill, Mika Häkkinen, Rubens Barrichello and Nigel Mansell. That's your top 5 with 76 laps to go. We'll be back after the break.
and he goes through that at about 100 miles an hour. That's where he went off and completely destroyed his car. In practice, he's coming up to the Wakefield Street right-hander now, third gear. Now a little short dash up to East Terrace Bend, then still in third gear, another right-hander, then up East Terrace towards the Markets turn. Lap 6 out of 81. Schumacher has got the race under control at the moment, and the German is enormously determined to become the first world champion that his country has ever produced.
Well, he's got the race under control to an extent, but he's not pulling away anything like as fast as we've seen happen in the Prix. Now, here's the start from Häkkinen's McLaren. Let's have a look. Off the line they go. The lights go green. Now, watch on the left there. There is Damon Hill. Nigel Mansell in the middle. Schumacher going for the outside, but Hill is on the inside. He's got the line for the centre chicane, but he's too tight. He will lose speed on the exit. Mansell bottles up behind Hill, and now that's slowed all three of them up. Häkkinen really right down on the revs there. You can hear the engine going. Now, that's what gave Schumacher that break, and we're back with Schumacher now, but it's good news for Damon Hill because he's only losing, he's still within a tenth of a second, and you can see just how hard Schumacher's trying. This is a real race.
Yes, and Damon Hill is actually gaining. He's on his 7th lap now. Out of the centre chicane, look back and you've seen
We're on lap 7 of the Australian Grand Prix, the World Championship decider for both the drivers and constructors titles. Michael Schumacher made a very good start indeed, took the lead into the first corner. Damon Hill followed him. Michael took about 2.5 seconds on that opening lap, but Damon is fighting back. The gap at the end of lap 6, 1.484 seconds, and fastest lap now in the hands of Damon Hill.
Well, what we're seeing at this very early stage of this Grand Prix is a blinding battle between Michael Schumacher, who's absolutely on the limit in his Benetton Ford, and Damon Hill, who seems capable of continually raising his own game, and he's closing down on Michael Schumacher. The gap at the end of the first lap was over 2 seconds, it even extended beyond that. But I believe that because of Hill and Mansell being on the left-hand side at the start, they were shorter or closer distance to the corner, but they were in the part of the track that was dirtier, and therefore it gave Schumacher that initial advantage. But Hill is responding absolutely magnificently. He wants to walk away from here and make history for himself and for his father.
Michael Schumacher sets a new fastest lap for himself, and also Damon Hill now 1.3 seconds behind. He is closing in on race leader. But with Häkkinen, Barrichello and Mansell completing the top 5, John, take us with the replay of the start on board Häkkinen.
Well, on the left-hand side, Nigel Mansell and Damon Hill. Michael Schumacher gets the best start because Mansell just lights up those tyres. But again, being on the left-hand side of the track, to me, I think that's the wrong side for pole, but that's the side that is designated. And the outcome of it was a brave move by Schumacher. He forced his way past Mansell on the right and got into the the centre chicane before Mansell. Damon got through cleanly, as you saw. Mansell didn't force any issues. He did the right thing, but then Mansell was over-eager to make up for that last ground and ran wide in a couple of corners later.
Don't know what's happening to Johnny Herbert, but he's fallen back to 15th position at the moment. He's lapping fairly quickly, but he's lost a lot of places. Maybe he has just spun off and has recovered the car again.
Well, another battle going on. This is for 4th and 5th place. Young Brazilian 22-year-old Rubens Barrichello driving for points, driving for a podium position. Nigel Mansell, veteran, making a Formula One comeback. Nigel, I don't know what your plans are for 1995, but if you want to be in the Williams team, you're going to have to pass Barrichello.
Well, not only that, John, I think he's got to practice some starts.
And look at the Jordan, very, very quick indeed through that new segment of the new corner, the centre chicane, pulls away from Nigel Mansell. The difference is that Mansell's got probably 70 to 80 horsepower more with the Renault V10 than Barrichello has with the Hart V10.
Michael Schumacher is on lap 9, as is Rubens Barrichello, ahead of our cameraman at the moment. Nigel Mansell taking us round this circuit. The gap 0.66 of a second at the end of lap 8. And we are starting lap 9 in a minute, and I'm wondering how soon, John, are we going to see the first pit stops? We might see them as early as lap 17, 18 maybe?
I think that there's a possibility, because as I said earlier, the track is what I would call aggressive. Because of the rain we had on Saturday, there have been other races, but they're run on different tyres, so the track, let's say, isn't run in yet for the Goodyear Formula 1 tyres. Therefore, I would predict early stops, certainly for Schumacher and possibly for Damon Hill. How many there will decide to make? Well, Schumacher has got the lead. It's a short lead. It's just 1.5 seconds. Whether he goes for 2, whether he goes for 3, or what Williams are planning to do with Damon Hill, we will know, I would think, within the next 10 to 12 laps.
New fastest lap of the race for leader Michael Schumacher, a 1:17.348. Damon Hill, well, he's following a 1:17.376. The difference is basically nothing, John.
Well, the difference is really on Damon locking up the right front going in. Now, I hope that has not created a little flat spot. The consequence of a flat spot, of course, is that the tyre is, when he hits the curb on the inside, and you can feel that his momentum, because of that lock-up, slightly, the concentration slightly affected. But gathering it back up now as he comes through hairpin bend onto pit straight. So, the gap, Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill, 1.535, 1.676 now at the end of lap 11. And Schumacher now using the traffic. This is the strength that Schumacher has displayed all through the 94 season. Damon getting caught behind Delatraz, doing his best to get out of the way, but Damon, you've got to be more forceful. I know you've got to be also very careful, but you can't let Schumacher take advantage of those situations, because that guy is going to leap in every opportunity he gets.
Jean-Denis Delatraz in 25th position, the second driver to be lapped, because Chattarella is already in the pits, and I think we can safely say he is the first retirement of this last race in 94. Well, 10 laps into the race, top 6 unchanged, with Alesi breathing down Mansell's neck, and Mansell very slowly losing ground on Barrichello.
Well, Barrichello's car, I must say, looks superior all around the circuit, with the exception of just an out-and-out horsepower to Mansell's Williams. And little Brazilian is driving his heart out. Look, no intimidation whatsoever is going to make him move off his racing line or concede. And now Jean Alesi's joined the duo into a trio. And this is a reverse of what we saw 1 week ago in Japan, when in appalling wet weather conditions, Mansell was forced to sit in the spray of Jean Alesi.
Lap times of race leader Michael Schumacher, a 1:18.1 because of Delatraz. Damon Hill, 1:18.019. Now, John, Damon made a mistake on that previous lap, and he was just about as quick as Michael. And I've got a feeling that at this stage of the race, Damon could just edge himself 10th by 10th closer to Michael Schumacher.
Well, I think that's very clearly a possibility. But the problem for Damon is going to arise is when these two get into traffic. We've already seen them get past Delatraz. Schumacher made an easy job of it. Damon made a slightly more difficult job. But there's a lot more traffic going to come. And it's in traffic historically that Schumacher has been more decisive. Now, Damon lost, I would have thought, 2 or 3 tenths with Delatraz, but he's been able to recover that ground, looks to me, quite comfortably. My only concern for him is that the locked right front he had at the end of the straight, the flat spot he may have put to that tyre will cause him vibration, and therefore ultimately he will lose fractions of seconds per lap, and he will be looking for an earlier pit stop maybe than he had originally planned.
Michael Schumacher 1.453 seconds ahead of Damon Hill, who is just a little bit quicker again on this lap. But the best thing is, John, it wasn't an anti-climax, it ended on the first lap.
And Damon in trouble, he missed the apex, he had to get off the throttle pedal, he had to sort of hold his breath and get the car. You can see the difference that that little error Damon has made. It's opened up maybe half a second, maybe a little over it. When they come back onto the straight again, that's where the superior horsepower of the Renault V10 can help claw back some of that little bit of lost ground. But comparing lap previous to this one, almost impossible with the onboard camera, which is a very wide angle lens, of course. But now looking from the straight back up, the gap appears to be more or less back to where it was.
Damon lost 4 tenths on that first section, but he's clawed 3 of them back in the second intermediate. So the gap will be roughly, as John said, the same. We are focusing on these two, but let's just go down the list. Mika Häkkinen, a massive 21.3 seconds behind race leader Michael Schumacher at the end of lap 12. Then it's Barrichello, Mansell, Alesi, Irvine, Brundle, Frentzen and Berger. Well, that went a bit quick, but it's the whole of the top 10. And we still have 25 cars in the race because Chattarella is definitely out of it.
Allard, this is the time of the Grand Prix where the strengths of each driver are really going to be put to the test. We're now already catching up to the back markers, and the next car up ought to be Hideki Noda in the second of the two LaRouche Fords. Schumacher came right up against him onto the Jones Straight. He lost a little bit of momentum as a consequence. He actually made, I think, an error and overran Noda. Now he's got to get into the slipstream, try and get out and alongside him before they get into the hairpin bend. And Damon Hill's going to try and slide under Noda at the same time. Damon closing down Noda, staying well on the left. Damon gets through, and this overtaking play, advantage to Damon Hill.
John, would that be a psychological advantage? Because Michael might now realise, like, whoa, he is good in traffic.
Well, in that particular overtaking manoeuvre, Schumacher set it up for Damon anyway, because Noda saw Schumacher, he also saw Damon behind, so he wasn't going to block Damon Hill. But it was really, I think, Schumacher overran Noda going on to the Jones Straight, which in my view was a small error of judgment on his part. He was too keen to use Noda to provide himself. Oh, and there we see Mark Blundell. Oh, and is he going to stay off the tower walls? Yes, he is. And Mark will, well, he gets it all gathered together, kept the engine running back onto the circuit, and that really not an unfamiliar sight here on the streets of Adelaide, because it punishes minute driving errors.
Well, the rest of this 25 car field is in a different race altogether. Mark Blundell, what happened? Oh, running the curb.
Yeah, he ran the curb, he made an error, he just got too much onto the curb, and that's the penalty. The car actually almost feels as if it's been pulled to the left, and fortunate he spun before he hit the tower wall and kept the engine running.
Johnny Herbert in the pits. Also the team Lotus team is ready for a pit stop, and Mark Blundell into the pits for a quick check. Now there's work being done on Herbert's car. They weren't ready for him. You see, tires are in the tire warmers. Another disappointing race for Johnny Herbert, who is now being pushed back.
Well, Allard, I think that the car is being pushed back very quickly because they're expecting Schumacher into the pits, and what they don't want to do is have Johnny Herbert's car being worked on in pit lane in the prospect of seeing Michael Schumacher coming in.
It's in the back of the garage at the moment, John, the Benetton, and I think that could well be the end of Johnny Herbert's Grand Prix here in Adelaide. What a shame. The team getting everything back together.
Well, Mansell has made it past, finally past young Brazilian Rubens Barrichello, and he will be delighted with that because he will have to now set his sights on the man in fourth place, and that is Mika Häkkinen. And there you see third and fourth, fifth and sixth.
Well, let's see what Nigel Mansell can do time-wise on that lap. He should be able to get close to Mika Häkkinen fairly quickly indeed.
And that was Fittipaldi in for an early stop on lap 16, so he's the first of the runners, as we would call them, to come in. Ordinarily Fittipaldi likes to do just one stop. He must have a problem, and he's going to be back in again, I'm quite sure.
The gap between Hill and Schumacher is 0.8 of a second. Michael lapping a high 17, Damon a mid 17. So that is what the situation is. Well, we have opposite Loch Alesi as our chauffeur through the streets of Adelaide.
And the battle that's going to take place very shortly for third place, Mika Häkkinen, another hard nut, somebody who wants to be on the podium for another occasion. Mansell, who really blew that pole position, the superb lap he set on Friday afternoon, battling now for third place. He's in fourth. And Jean Alesi now starting to breathe, give Rubens Barrichello a hard time. I have to say, I'd rather get Nigel Mansell pressing on me than Jean Alesi.
Also, let's not forget John Mansell went off on that very first lap where he lost most of the place because he was third after the start, then went off to the circuit and lost more places.
Again, I think that's partly the consequence of having the pole position.
Whoa,
Eddie Irvine! Eddie, that was an unforced error. Oh, that is a engine problem. And that was the reason why we thought that was a driver error, but in fact, something occurred at the same point. And I suspect what happened to Eddie was he put the brakes on and there's fluids, liquids there, igniting under the engine cover, so no problem, Eddie Irvine. Mechanical problem caused that car to spin, and immediately the car was going backwards. The smoke appeared, and that is the end of the race. Disappointment for the young Ulsterman.
Well, there's more traffic. Brabham and Noda and other drivers being lapped at the moment. Michael Schumacher, 1:19.4. Damon Hill, a 1:19.0, and Alesi in the pits.
Well, Alesi's come into the pits at the end of the 18th lap. So let's see what Ferrari are doing. It certainly looks that this is the pattern for Ferrari. They are on a 3-stop race as well. 6.4, very quick indeed. But remember, speed limit in the race reduced down from the 120 kilometers we've been accustomed to since the French Grand Prix to the usual 80. And there you see the problem with fresh tyres. Too much right foot, not enough rear grip.
Michael Schumacher is right behind. Must be Frank Lacoste, John. How is he?
And he's in the pits. Well, Schumacher, this I have to predict. And Damon Hill. So the Williams and the Benetton teams both on what I now believe will be a 3-stop race. Who's going to be out first? Because Damon Hill had to travel slightly further in the pit lane to get to his pits. The Benetton team have got their car moving, and he is out. Damon Hill's car is moving as well, and it is status quo, but it's now down to the ability of both drivers to maximise their speed on this outlap. Michael Schumacher, again, over the course of the year, has been the man that has made the best of his outlap, but Damon Hill knows he's on a mission, and that mission is a World Championship crown.
A 1:32.7 for Michael Schumacher, including the stop. A 1:33.406 for Damon Hill, including the stop. So Michael winning 0.8 of a second there. The gap exactly 1 second, and it's a bit more at the moment, I think.
Well, there you see the gap on the road, and visually it's increased from the 1 second, in fact, it was at the end of lap 18. And this is where, in my view, the strengths that Schumacher has come to the fore. Mika Häkkinen leading a Grand Prix, Nigel Mansell second.
No, they're
still. Yes.
They were. I mean, Schumacher and Hill were so far ahead, John.
Yeah.
I mean, unbelievable.
But watch Mansell looking down the inside. Is he going to go? Well, Mika, I have to say, was quite generous, but Mansell overshot, and Mika now just edges Mansell to the edge of the curve. Once again, Mansell involved in the tightest fights we have seen all around the circuit.
Now, with Damon Hill having made his pit stop, we could assume Nigel Mansell come in fairly quickly indeed. The gap between Schumacher and Hill, their first lap on new tyres. Schumacher 1:21.865, Hill 1:21.582.
Well, fine lap from Damon Hill. He's done the job he was required to do. Here's Nigel Mansell going ever so deep, but really no way to get round the hairpin bend. Mika Häkkinen didn't force the issue, realised that Mansell had a problem to slow down, and quite clearly knew to drive behind the Williams and then just force Mansell to drive partially up the curve. Nigel is really still coming to terms with the racing that Formula One cars are all about. He certainly got the speed on the single qualifying lap, but adapting from the Indy car, which is a much heavier car, less responsive, and here we see what the response is from Häkkinen and from Mansell.
Well, we are waiting for more and more drivers to come into the pits. There's JJ Leto for his first pit stop. JJ in 18th position. But Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill, they are together. They are closer than they have been for a very long time on the circuit. They are just over half a second apart, and that is close. Michael Schumacher 17.3, Damon Hill 17.2, traffic ahead of him.
Well, another crunch moment, important for both Schumacher and Hill. There's problem in the pit. Hideki Noda's LaRue sits out of the race. That looks like a serious blow-up in the pit lane. And the fire marshals around, and the LaRue's team dumping fire extinguishant around the back of that Ford HP engine. Get the car off the pit lane quickly, get that away safely. And there Damon Hill, the view he has of Michael Schumacher. Now this is the problem that Schumacher has. Damon's coming up alongside him, but Damon not quite as aggressive as Schumacher was. There was no way Schumacher was going to give up the lead. Whatever it took, he was prepared to do.
Did you see how Frank Legorge tried desperately to get out of the way, locking up? He didn't want to get in the way of any of those things.
Well, imagine if you're in your second Grand Prix and suddenly you're the man that's
mass crowd
of the two contestants for the crowd. Wisely stayed as tight as he could on the right-hand side. But what a battle this is. I mean, we didn't believe that this title battle was going to be won, well, certainly, let's say, fought at this point so tightly. But what a tribute, what an accolade to both Schumacher and Damon Hill, both men right on the outer edge of their ability, of the performance of their cars. There we see Mika Häkkinen locking up, and Nigel Mansell just drives under him. Mika, you should have learned from Mansell, you were too keen. Schumacher just gets it perfect with Michele Alboreto, but again, look at the speed that Damon Hill has. He doesn't even have to use the slipstream of Alboreto. He can just stay within, 30 meters or less of Michael Schumacher and get drawn right up to him until they come into braking into the hairpin at the end of row. And Mimo Chattarella showing us that he can spin his, and he keeps it going.
Well, John, if we go back a year ago, we saw Damon Hill being very quick down that straight. Damon decided to race with less rear wing than Alain Prost did that year, and ended up being the quicker of the two.
And what was rather disappointing was that the Williams team at that point weren't prepared to let Damon get past Alain Prost, who was running second, and have a go, at least see if he could make any inroads into the lead that Ayrton Senna had. And that was a team decision that may have been out of reverence to Alain Prost in his last Grand Prix, and of course he was the world champion in 1993.
Oh, Schumacher is being held up here, I think, John. Schumacher is being held up, and Damon is right behind him.
But could Damon get through? We can't see from the rearward facing camera. No, he didn't. Damon had to wait. Again, you've got to calculate the risks. You go, oh, and Damon in trouble. Ran wide over the curb, and Michael Schumacher countered that by watching it in the mirror. You see the gap extending. This is Adelaide. Traffic, a street circuit, unforgiving, and Damon again locking up the back end of the car, swinging out. Once again, his rhythm, because of that car just getting between himself and Schumacher, so eager, so keen, almost overdriving in that part of the circuit.
Could it also be, John, maybe that he had to go offline and pick up a bit of dirt on the tyres, and
Well, absolutely, but he should have known that, Allard. There's no point thinking that might have been the reason. He's a Grand Prix driver. He's won 9 Grand Prix. So why should he find out, oh, it's slippery on the outside? I didn't know that.
1.321 seconds is the gap between race leader and world championship leader Michael Schumacher and the man in second place, Damon Hill. We're on lap 24 of 81, and we're going to be back after the break with sensational action from sensational Adelaide on Eurosport.
As again, Schumacher has got the problem, and this time it's getting past Mark Blundell, who has rejoined the race, having spun off in the Tyrrell Yamaha.
Absolutely, Mark Blundell back there. We're just ahead of Blundell, the Lotus of Miko Sala. It's going to be important for Schumacher to try and get by Blundell going into the hairpin, and he's a little bit too far behind. That Yamaha engine has a lot of horsepower, but Blundell leaving the line wide. It slowed Schumacher though, but still the important thing from Schumacher's point of view is that Hill is still behind. Now ahead of them, they've now got Mika Sala and Gerhard, and Lacey spins there. Spins out of the race, surely.
Yes, No, Lacey manages to keep the engine, does not stall, but of course he will have lost the place, I think. No, he's kept the place ahead of Parnis, who is 10th. And another lap is completed at this terrific pace with Damon Hill hanging on, and he's got past the Lotus, as has of course Michael Schumacher. They're threading their way through the field now. Mika Salo was the man, the Finnish driver, in only his second Grand Prix. He's 14th at the moment, but both Schumacher and Damon Hill have passed, and they have lapped everybody up to about 14th position already on the 25th lap out of 81.
Absolutely fantastic racing, but let's just recap on where we're up to with these cars and pit stop strategy. A few drivers have gone for 3 stops. There's one, Michael Schumacher.
Michael Schumacher leads the Australian Grand Prix, leads the chase of the World Championship on lap 25, but Damon Hill is right behind him. 0.489 of a second at the end of lap 24. This is the finale we were hoping for. I mean, it's an immaculate race this afternoon here in Adelaide. I don't know who's going to win.
Well, we're only on lap 25 and there are 81 laps of this race. We're not even, well, we're barely at a third distance. And this is a very, very tough circuit. Physically, it's tough. Mentally, you have a chance, and physically, to relax on the Brabham Straight. But if these two guys are going to go at this pace, when the race is finished, they're going to have to be lifted out of their cars because they are absolutely 100% committed. And I mean, I've not seen Damon as aggressive and forceful in competition as he is here. Now, clearly, there's a good prize for him at the end of the day.
Well, John, would you mind being lifted out of your car being world champion?
I would be really upset if I didn't win the championship and being lifted out of the car.
The Williams team is ready for Nigel Mansell.
And Mika Häkkinen, he's in for the first time. Martin Brundle.
So Brundle leaving the pits, and is that a good stop? Where are you, Martin? Where's the time? 38.1. That's a little slow. That's about 6 seconds slower. So he might be on a 2-stop race.
Well, trouble ahead again for Schumacher and Hill, but we're going to just have a little quick look back. Something that happened during our commercial break. And it is, of course, Jean Alesi showing us that he can do pretty pirouettes, even in the race. He did some in the practice and this morning. Spins the car, keeps it going back on the track. No problem at all, but the consequence is he's back in 7th place. But here, Christian Fittipaldi, the man directly ahead of Michael Schumacher, stays over to the right. Schumacher gets through, Damon Hill gets through. Well done, Christian Fittipaldi. Now, what we want to see is the view from Fittipaldi's car from that onboard camera.
Mansell in the pits for his first pit stop. At the end of lap 26, Nigel Mansell comes in. Now, that looks very much, John, like a 2-stop race for Nigel Mansell and a 3-stop race for Schumacher and Hill. Mansell leaving the pits, 8.5 is stop, and total 1:36.922, and that means that he has to stop roughly 4 seconds longer, so taking on basically 40 litres of fuel more.
Oh, look at this, right at the end of the straight. Damon Hill almost punches the back of the rear wing of Michael Schumacher's Benetton Ford, as Pierluigi Martini was the man that they were both overtaking. And Martini, of course, trying to draw himself along with the 2 leaders and gain some advantage on those cars that he himself is involved in a battle with. That's Zanardi, Frentzen and Olivier Panis.
Overtaken David Brabham down the main straight are both race leader Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill. Michael Schumacher in his 52nd Grand Prix. Damon Hill in his 34th Grand Prix. These two drivers, well, a total of 84 Grand Prix starts together, fighting it out for the World Championship. I don't think that's ever happened before.
Well, to see a young man win, and the youngest man in my memory being a world champion was Emerson Fittipaldi back in 1972 when he drove for Colin Chapman in one of those wonderful Lotus 72s. But Schumacher gets past Zanardi in a part of the circuit which was a gamble, but he took it, he got away with it, and now the gap between Damon Hill and Zanardi, you can see it on the road. Zanardi's got to stay over to the left, leave it clear for Damon to go down the inside. perfectly executed.
I wonder, John, and I don't know, we can ask David Coulthard, who's walked into the booth, whether he has known anything from the driver's briefing this morning. I think most drivers are very cooperative. Could something have been said in that driver's briefing?
I think you're right, Allard. I think that it's been a concern throughout the year as to people moving over for maybe more easily for Michael than for Damon. And there is an argument that says that a driver earns that respect on the circuit, but I think that the best thing we can see here today is what's happening. All the drivers are being cooperative and leaving Damon and Michael to fight it out for the World Championship.
We've got Pierluigi Martini in the pits for his first stop. But just a moment's respite, catch his breath. Michael Schumacher has opened up that gap back up to 1.3 seconds. Damon Hill, who was literally a lap and a half ago almost driving over the back of Michael Schumacher. And here we have Frank Lagorche in for his first service as Mika Häkkinen does the same in his McLaren.
Now Barrichello overtaken Häkkinen in the pits. Whoa! Barrichello has overtaken Mika Häkkinen in the pits, and that could be a bit of sour grapes for the McLaren team.
Well, there are always ongoing bets. Look at Häkkinen looking to dive down. Rubens Barrichello said, "Sod off. I passed you in the pit lane. I'm not going to let you pass me on the track. Your team didn't do as good a job as mine." But of course, Häkkinen and Barrichello will battle like cat and dog.
Everything in the pit lane is fairly quiet at the moment. I stand up and have a look. No, there's no one planning on coming in. So, Schumacher and Hill are 1.6 seconds behind each other.
Oh, and Barrichello goes wide, coming on to the Brabham Straight. Mika Häkkinen must be laughing himself in his balaclava helmet. Look at Barrichello drawing back up to the rear, on a lazy flies down the inside. And has he gotten around the corner? Yes, he did. What a move. What an unbelievable motor racing move. You saw it here live on Eurosport. I hope we can see replays from all the onboard cameras, because that was one of the bravest moves you will ever see.
Talk about one-stop race possible. Who knows? Gerhard Berger moves into third place from 11th on the grid. I haven't seen him in the pits yet, but he is in third position with that number 28 Ferrari. Behind Michael Schumacher, who's now 1.6 seconds ahead of Damon Hill and has just posted a new fastest lap of the race, a 1:17.140. Nigel Mansell's back in fourth, a lazy fifth, Häkkinen sixth, Barrichello is seventh, Brundle eighth, Oliver Pennis is in ninth, and in 10th position we find Heinz-Harald Frentzen.
Well, this is lap 31 of what has been an absolutely breathless Grand Prix, not just at the front because the battle with Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill, but this battle going on with John Alesi in fifth, Häkkinen sixth, Barrichello seventh. Now, literally a lap ago, it was the opposite. Barrichello was the one who had the advantage. He ran wide coming into Brabham Straight. Mika Häkkinen got past, but an unbelievable. I mean, here in our commentary booth, David Coulthard, we've got George Harrison here with us as well, Allard Kalf and myself, could not believe that Alesi, the audacious pass that he made, not only did he make it, but he got away with it.
Damon Hill chases Michael Schumacher. They are on roughly identical lap times. Although Damon is a second and a half behind Michael Schumacher. That's the biggest gap we've seen for a very long time indeed. Now they're going to make two more stops, so anything can happen here in Adelaide. Anything. 2 seconds. Damon's lost a lot of time. Michael again at 1:17.194. Damon at 1:17.676.
And to some extent, it's at this point in the race where Schumacher is just remorseless, because of his physical condition. He is without doubt the fittest Grand Prix driver I think I've ever seen, and it is that fitness and that strength that may be playing its role in this Grand Prix right now. I mean, I didn't believe we were going to see such a hard, intense relentless battle that we've been watching here, but the gap appears now to be edging ever further towards the favour of Michael Schumacher. It's here that Damon Hill's really had the advantage. He's been able to claw back the ground that he's been losing on other parts of the circuit, sheer top speed.
Well, Damon losing again 3/10 on the first two sections of that lap, so I think we can assume that the gap will grow when they get back to start-finish. Nigel Mansell in 4th position. He is some 13.5 seconds behind the man in 3rd place, Gerhard Berger. Gerhard, who's always been a fairly cheeky personality, who actually said after qualifying on Friday that he thought Nigel Mansell was the best out there. He said he was driving like an 18-year-old, sideways on the throttle, brilliant.
Well, I think what Gerhard meant is an 18-year-old going on 41.
Something like that. So the gap gone exactly 0.3 of a second bigger between Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher.
Well, is Schumacher going to get cooperation from Frentzen? No, he's not. Frentzen was not kind to Schumacher there. He shut the door. Now Frentzen must be aware of what's going on. Damon would have seen that. That will give him some spirit. Now Frentzen has, looking in his mirrors, he's going to stay on the left on the straight. But of course Schumacher hasn't got the speed in the straight line that V10 Mercedes engine has got.
Of course, Frentzen being very careful with that car. He's been presented with that car by team boss Peter Sauber before this race as a sort of thank you for all your efforts in the 1994 season, and it comes complete with a 3.5-litre V10 Mercedes-Benz engine.
The main thing is, has he got the engine module to make sure it's a runner, Alan, because the engine itself is worth nothing. The thing that makes these engines so powerful, so efficient, in fact, is the electronics, and it is the electronics that has been developed, and in the last 5 years, just phenomenal things that you can now do with a contemporary Formula 1 engine. Schumacher looking, David Brabham stays over to the left. Again, good use of the traffic. Damon now 2 cars between himself and Michael Schumacher. Frentzen backed off the throttle, allowed Damon the route, did the correct thing, but now Damon's got to find a way past David Brabham.
Well, I suppose David is going to be fairly cooperative in 19th position, running in the high 121s. And
but Alan, the thing is now that Schumacher has just got that additional breathing space. He's got a fairly clear road ahead. He's going to really maximise. He's been doing it the entire race so far, but he's got to try and take full advantage. Damon looking for David to stay to the left. He does. He gets through. But as Damon exits the hairpin, Schumacher already some 150 metres ahead of him, making his way back up to the completion of lap 34.
We're not even half distance yet, with Damon Hill again locking the right front on his Williams Renault. We've seen a lot of wheels lock in this Grand Prix. I've also seen a lot of people lifting wheels when they turn in, John.
Well, that's a function of how these suspensions on particular cars, they run a bit like a Formula 3000 car, and what that means is it's got virtually no suspension travel whatsoever. It's almost solid across the 2 front wheels. Other cars, other engineers feel that on a circuit like Adelaide, a street track, you want to allow the car to work, the suspension to work, rather than rely on the little downforce you have. Berger into the pits. And is this Berger's single pit stop, or are we going to see more from him?
Well, as far as I know, it's his first pit stop. So Gerhard Berger will definitely lose positions. He was in 3rd place, but he'll probably lose maybe 1 or 2 maximum.
7.4 seconds, and the Ferrari back on pit lane, running on the engine limiter. That's that horrible noise. Once they cross the line, well, Mansell has clearly gone up into 3rd place. We see Mansell now, and he is 56.5 seconds behind race leader Schumacher.
Well, that's about 3/4 of a lap anyway. So, David Coulthard, Williams driver, with us in the booth. Did you envisage such a sensational start to this Grand Prix, David?
No, it's been an absolutely fantastic race, and I don't think any of us could have expected it to be so close. And I have to say that although Damon's dropping back a little bit from Michael just now, he looks like he's been driving absolutely out of his skin, and you know, hopefully we'll be able to see things closed up a little bit later in the race.
Oh, Schumacher in trouble. Schumacher, look at Damon Hill and Schumacher. Oh, no! Schumacher and him, and this looks like the World Championship.
This is the end for Schumacher.
Well, let's wait and see. Whatever happens to Damon, he's in trouble as well.
He's in trouble as well.
So Schumacher out of his car. Damon Hill will have to go back to the pits with a bumper arm on the left-hand side. Whatever Schumacher did in the corner, and Damon now, you can see a tire looks like it's gone down. Is this the end of the 94? What an appalling sight for what had been absolutely fantastic. Damon Hill, left front going down, but more importantly, the upper wishbone, you can see the rearward link of that upper wishbone is kinked. Damon Hill ought to be able to get back to the pits, but can they get it changed in enough time to allow Damon Hill to get back out onto the circuit and
Well, John, they are preparing. I can see a track rod in the pits. I can see a wishbone in the pits, and there was a very disgusted Schumacher on screen.
Well, let's have a look again and see Schumacher in the corner where we saw him go off this morning. Turns in. Suddenly something happens. I don't know, it looks very strange. Hits the wall, bounces back out again, and Damon Hill now coming up on the inside. Schumacher squeezes, Damon hits him, rides his rear over the left front of Damon into the tire wall. Now, what caused Schumacher to veer into the wall in the first place? Was it hit, or was it... Well, there are marks, you can see.
Oh, he just gone straight on all by himself.
Yes, and Damon clearly no involvement whatsoever. Now Schumacher shuts the door.
I think, John, Schumacher sort of drove into him.
So Damon is now back into pit lane. Left front deflated, a new left front goes on, and the mechanics will get to work replacing that upper wishbone. But the problem is, how much time is Damon Hill going to lose in the pit lane? Where will he rejoin this Grand Prix? Disgust on his head, you can see him shaking it. Now I think they're trying to straighten that out. I wouldn't be particularly happy. Patrick Head looking at it. Well, he's still looking at it.
For the road for Nigel, for Damon Hill. Is that the end of his World Championship challenge? That is bent. Is it broken? Is it safe going out? What? The engine has died. Gerhard Berger is going to lead this Grand Prix from Jean Alesi, Mika Häkkinen, Rubens Barrichello and Martin Brundle. But this is the end for Damon Hill, or is it?
Well, in my mind, there is no possibility of allowing Damon to drive with a wishbone that has been kinked severely as that, because under certain loads that could be a mechanical problem. Let's look and see how Damon Hill saw this incident. This is the onboard camera. Schumacher, all on his own, suddenly veered off to the right. Was it a mistake? Was it a car problem? Pulls straight across to the left to block Damon, then back to the right and forces Damon into the curb. Nowhere for Damon Hill to go. And that is almost a mirror of what occurred back in Japan with Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna. And I can imagine the disgust. Well, there's one face who knows what he's done. There's another man who has seen the World Championship taken away from him. He feels justifiably robbed. And the entire Williams team, they're standing around looking at it, waiting for it to repair in itself. They've now got the toolbox out. They're now going to take that offending part off. Michael Schumacher, well,
if only Damon had waited for another corner, maybe. Who knows? What can we say? Nigel Mansell leads the Australian Grand Prix at the end of lap 37, 3.2 seconds ahead of Gerhard Berger, Jean Alesi, Mika Häkkinen, Rubens Barrichello and Martin Brundle. But what a way to end the season, with Michael Schumacher probably making his one and only single mistake of the year. There is Damon Hill. He will be saying words I will not repeat on television. But anyway, teammate Mansell leads the race.
Well, everybody in the Benetton Ford team are delighted. They have got a world champion driver. But what a way to win it. And Michael Schumacher, I know, is not happy the way that he has won this world championship. In fact, well, I'm sure he's aware that Damon is not on the circuit. It's disappointment beyond words for Damon Hill. He drove absolutely brilliantly. It's the best Grand Prix, I believe, in all those we've seen from Damon Hill. And to have it end in such a dramatic and, in effect, unnecessary fashion, because clearly Michael Schumacher drove into Damon Hill's car. we saw history repeat itself. Back in 1989, it was Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna. Back in 1990, it was Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost. And here in Adelaide, in the last Grand Prix of the year, Michael Schumacher drove his car, gave Damon Hill no room whatsoever. Now, the argument will be that Michael could have said, well, he didn't have to pass me. But Damon, in my mind, he put his car in position. He clearly was forced into no man's land. An awful and a bad taste to what up to now had been an absolutely fantastic finale in the 94 championship. Damon Hill will, I'm sure, in a moment when this race is finished, want some explanation. Michael, that smile, I have to say, is... Well, you are world champion.
He'll probably say you can't believe it, John. Driving off the circuit, hitting the wall, and one corner later, he's basically world champion. Anyway, one thing they're not going to win at Benetton is the World Constructors' Championship, because Williams, the team that has got one car running already leading that championship, has definitely, while Lazy stalls his engine during his second pit stop. So Williams has won the Constructors' World Championship, and Michael Schumacher, the drivers. Morning, George.
Good morning. Well, I think this is amazing to see how Schumacher had to do that, didn't he? Closed the door. He was deliberately did that. There was no question about that. He did it deliberately, and I think it goes along with the rest of the year in as much as all the little tricks and underhanded stuff that went down. It's such a shame.
Well, I mean, I look at Damon, you can see the sheer disbelief, the disappointment on his face. But Damon, you should not be. You have fought today like a champion. And the whole Hill family must be proud of the achievements and the efforts of Damon Hill throughout the 94 season. And today, in my mind, Damon Hill's drive was a drive that was worthy of a world champion. Frank Williams absolutely devastated equally by that maneuver that we saw some 4 laps ago. And clearly the damage to Damon Hill's car was much greater than we were able to see from the camera in the pits, because had they been able to replace that upper wishbone on the left-hand side, they would have done so. But if it's any consolation to Williams, they are on course to win the Manufacturers' Championship. And Nigel Mansell currently leading this, the 10th Grand Prix of Australia in Adelaide.
A man born in 1953 leads the Australian Grand Prix. A man born in 1959 is in second place, Gerhard Berger. Who's going to win, Mansell or Berger? Schumacher is world champion. Williams has won the Constructors' title. We'll be back after the break.
But now it's Nigel Mansell carving his way through the field with a lead of 2 seconds over Gerhard Berger. This astonishing race may have already resolved the World Championship of 1994, but the battle for leadership is far from over, because Gerhard Berger, who has already won in Australia twice, because he won in 1987 for Ferrari, his current team, and he won in 1992 for McLaren in his last year with the Woking team, is pressing hard on Nigel Mansell. And Gerhard Berger said to me yesterday, I've won 1 Grand Prix this year. There's Michael Schumacher on the back of a motorcycle being taken back for a very joyous reception at Benetton, absolutely no doubt at all. But Gerhard Berger said to me yesterday, I've won 1 Grand Prix this year. I was hoping to win 2. I'm full of praise for what Ferrari have done this season, because the new Ferrari team manager Jean Todt has dragged it back from the abyss to a race-winning situation. Gerhard Berger won in Germany, and the team have had a couple of pole positions. And Gerhard Berger is now pushing for the lead. There he is. He's just passed the Minardi of Pierluigi Martini, who is down in 12th position and has already...
Nigel Mansell's never won the Australian Grand Prix before. Gerhard Berger won it back in 1987 in a Ferrari, and back in 1992 when he was driving a McLaren Honda. Could it be the 3rd victory for Gerhard Berger, or is Mansell gonna break his Australian duck? We're on lap 42 of 81.
And the gap between Mansell and Gerhard Berger, just under 2 seconds. And Gerhard Berger, the man who appears to be on a one-stop race strategy, certainly who's only been in once to date, has got Nigel Mansell in his sights. And I mean, Gerhard has been, if you like, the backbone this year of the Ferrari team. He's fought through all the problems that Ferrari have had. He's emerged as being the driver who understands, if you like, the team and what John Barnard and his team of engineers are trying to achieve within Ferrari. Currently, well, the gap, in fact, at the end of lap 42 extended up to 3.2, but that's clearly a question of traffic. So can Berger eat into Mansell's 3.2 second lead? There it is. We're on lap 43 of 81 and traffic ahead. Mansell not probably quite so race sharp in traffic as Berger, but little, well, we're just under just over half distance, and it's a very, very long Grand Prix.
Nigel Mansell coming towards the Foster's hairpin to complete lap 42. Well, we just had a 10-second penalty for Jean-Denis Delatraz for speeding in the pit lane. And Mansell and Berger, the gap 3.140. They were both lapping in the mid-118 range. That is, of course, about a second and a half off what Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher were doing. Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher, the two drivers that gave us a great show during the opening laps of this Grand Prix. And I have to say, it ended very sadly indeed with that accident on lap 40.
And that sadness, in fact, I feel much more strongly about, because for a champion, for any championship to be decided in the way we've seen here in Adelaide this afternoon, for me is a bad way to end the season. We have seen it in the past. We saw it with Prost and Senna. We saw it with Senna and Prost, 89 and 90. And for a world championship in a particularly difficult year, and as a year where there's been controversy, tragedy, we hoped we were seeing a finale to that year which would have lifted the year, regained some of the credibility. I have to say, a lot of the credibility to this year's championship that evaporated, and that move by Michael Schumacher on Damon Hill.
Mansell and Berger leading Mika Häkkinen. Häkkinen some 10.6 seconds behind. The gap between Mansell and Berger now down to 2.6. That's good to see them fight. And of course, Mika Häkkinen, let's not forget, his lap times are, well, roughly the same as Mansell. So he is 13.7 seconds behind. Barrichello is 3.5 seconds behind Häkkinen. Brundle creeps into the top 6. Pennes, Frentzen, Blundell, Alesi and Fittipaldi complete the top 10. But as John said, it's already we're half distance. We've had a lot of actions. We probably have about 3 Grand Prix worth of action, John. But there's still 40, well, just under 40 laps to go now.
I just can't forget what you witnessed on screen a little over 8 laps ago. The disappointment I feel, not just for Damon Hill, not for Michael Schumacher, but his disappointment is countered by the World Championship. But there are hundreds of millions of people around the world who wanted to see this title battle go down to the wire. The wire I'm talking about is a checkered flag, and they have been shortchanged in that move by Michael Schumacher.
John, if I say that Damon Hill today has driven better than on any race we've probably seen him all year, more decisive, and if he does this all the time, that's a world champion in the making. I mean, well, definitely.
I think that is very much the case, but the point I think that Damon has to recognize is that he can't just do it selectively. He's got to do it all the time.
Well, doing it all the time is Gerhard Berger, because he's eating into Nigel Mansell's lead. And we're on lap 46. The gap is something like 1.910 seconds. And with us again, Williams driver David Coulthard. There's something on the circuit.
It's a bit, somebody's chucked a beer can, or a beer can has found its way onto the circuit. And that little tinny or tube of lager will be pretty squashed up. But more importantly, it could be of danger to a car, because the speed these cars are traveling at, and even hitting something as light as a can, could partially damage or lead to damage around the front wing or even part of the suspension.
Zanardi, Schumacher, Hill, Sciattarella, Katayama and Noda are not running. And for the statistics, lap 36 it happened, the accident between Schumacher and Hill. A man running around from commentary booth to commentary booth at the moment is Williams driver David Coulthard, still with us in the booth. You see Nigel Mansell leading the race, and I think we can say congratulations on winning the Constructors' World Championship.
Thank you.
You've scored quite a few points towards that, but we saw a great race, a sad end of course, but this could turn into a great race as well.
Yeah, I think this is shaping up to be a good battle between Nigel and you see the Swiss driver having to get out of the way. But it's turning out to be a good battle between Nigel and Gerhard, the two, I think, the oldest drivers in the race. And, you know, it'll be interesting to see just if Gerhard can actually get close enough to be on Nigel's rear wing, then he may have an opportunity of getting by, because, of course, the Ferrari V12 is more than a match for the Renault V10.
Interesting, David, just watching Mansell and Berger, two of the, well, certainly Mansell is the oldest driver currently in Formula One, and Berger, well, in his middle 30s, but by the standard of you young guys, he's probably a bit of an old-timer. I don't believe, as great as Mansell is and as good as Berger is, that they have got it in them to run at the kind of pace that we saw Schumacher and Hill run at in those opening laps. And I think that that's the advantage that the younger man has. They're more committed, they're physically better prepared. They don't have the old head yet, but that'll come in time. But it's a balance between the ability to run flat out and use your head.
Well, I think that's correct, and once again we saw from a qualifying performance that Nigel is very spectacular and was able to turn a very quick lap, but straight away from the race he hasn't been able to, and in fairness he's been in traffic, but he hasn't been able to turn the sort of lap times that Damon was able to do. And just on Damon's performance, I have to say, once again, it appears the more pressure you give him, the more you put up against him. You can see Schumacher returning to his pit, looking very happy with his world title. But I was just going to make the point that the more you throw at Damon, the more he seems to respond. But as you quite rightly say, he has to do that now every race next year.
And he's got to raise himself. He can't rely on a 1-point differential in a championship battle to be the cause. You've got to start the season like that, and you've got to maintain that all the way through. I mean, Damon is still, in relative terms, a very young Grand Prix driver. He is still, in effect, discovering his own potential. He probably still needs, I would consider, more support from within the team. But to balance that, the reason why he feels he doesn't get it is because he himself isn't giving that indication to the team. They don't see that total unbridled commitment because they sense that Damon himself is unsure of himself. But his drive today clearly was a drive of the highest class, and certainly I would say the best race I've ever seen Damon Hill produce.
Michael Schumacher back in his own garage, being Formula One world champion, and I suppose this race will put an end to the friendship that existed between Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher. There were verbal words before Jerez, there was a sort of a handshake, but I think this stops it for a while, John. Good thing we've got a couple of months to rest.
Well, we'll have plenty of time to rest, but these guys, by the time they get back from Australia, they'll be about 2 to 3 weeks, and already the teams will start building, or they are currently building, their 95 chassis, but some teams will run, when available, the new 3-litre engine for 95, or where not available, they will run the 94 3.5-litre engine in a modified car, a 95/94 chassis, because in 95 there are big changes coming to the aerodynamic properties of the car. There's a much larger aerodynamic step underneath the chassis, smaller wings, the wings are coming inwards and the weight's going up, plus some passive safety changes, which I hope will be sufficient to increase, though I have got my own reservations that they're not doing enough to provide even more safety for the drivers.
No, 2.271 seconds, the gap between Mansell and Berger now. Häkkinen, safe distance behind. Then it's Barrichello behind Häkkinen, 1.5 seconds. That was on the previous lap, it's now 3.6. So Mika and Barrichello getting caught in traffic, I suppose. Well, what a race we could have here for the remaining 31 laps of this Australian Grand Prix. On the right side, you see all the rubber being thrown off the tyres.
And that's a really big problem, because not only is it on the straight, but it's off the line in any corner. And if you just put one wheel onto that, it's as if you lose all steering control and you will just fly off the racetrack. Always a problem, particularly on a street track, because it is not a circuit that is accustomed to being used. And with the aggressive nature of the track, what we're seeing is a fairly substantial tyre wear. That's what those black rubber pellets are the result of.
Mansell recording his fastest lap of the race, a 18.193, I'm sorry. That is still 1 second off the fastest lap of the race, set by Michael Schumacher on lap 29, a 1:17.140. Damon Hill's fastest lap of the race, a 1:17.151. So those very close as well. Barrichello in the pits.
Well, we saw that Barrichello was able to overtake Mika Häkkinen in his Marlboro McLaren Peugeot earlier in the race. Barrichello in for his second stop, and we have to wait and see, was the gap between himself and Mika Häkkinen too great? Häkkinen ought to be able to come in and out and retain his third position.
Well, Barrichello a 1:34.352 on that lap and the pit stop. That's roughly around 15 seconds. He lost just over 15 seconds. So Häkkinen should be able to do that. Only just though.
Well, this is the camera shot, the onboard shot, which I really love, because this makes me feel like I'm in a Formula One car rather than in our commentary booth, facing the pits in Adelaide. And once again, the pit lane, JJ Lehto just exiting.
We've got 17 cars still running after 51 laps here in Adelaide, with Jean-Denis Delatras and David Brabham bringing up the rear of the field. 30 laps to go. Mansell, Berger and Häkkinen being the top three. Actually, Brundle is fourth, so that's a good result for the McLaren team so far. Barrichello, Panis, Frentzen and Alesi. Now, John, if anything is to happen to Mansell and Berger in this Grand Prix, Häkkinen and Brundle are there to pick up the pieces.
And we look down directly in front of us. The Williams pits are preparing for a stop for race leader Nigel Mansell, currently on lap 52, and there would appear that Mansell is going to come in at the end of 52, maybe do one more lap, but very shortly in for his second stop. Fuel and tires. Here is Mansell coming up. No, he's not. He's going on for one more lap. I'm trying to see the Williams pit boards, the signal they give him. The plus 2.1. That's the lead he has over Gerhard Berger.
It's 2.2 now after lap 52. But the tyre warmers are still on the tyre, so he is not coming in yet. As soon as the tyre warmers go off, the tyres are ready. Nigel's ready. The team's ready for the, I think, final pit stop.
David Coulthard, you've been in a situation of multiple pit stop races. When the tyres are on the pit wall, how long would you normally stay out on the track once you're aware that they're ready for you? Would it be a lap, 2 laps, or would it be longer?
Well, I would be expecting Nigel to come in on this lap, because as we can see from the booth here, they've taken the heating warmers off the tyres, and they'll be starting to lose temperature quite quickly, so he'll definitely be coming in at the end of this lap.
Well, that'll be lap 53. Martin Brundle back out again. So the battle for the bottom 6 positions. Barrichello, Brundle, now Oliver Panis in the first of the 2 Ligiers into the points.
John, I also think now we've seen on this Grand Prix that Damon was using the same strategy as Michael Schumacher, both going for a 3-stop race. They're equally fast. In the past we've seen Damon losing out, like Mansell, Berger, Häkkinen and all the rest is. They're on 2 or maybe even less stop races and losing out to, they were losing out to Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher.
Well, it was going to be the quickest way, but it was a strategy that you would only use if you felt that your competitors were going to do it. With Schumacher being able to lead, then the 3-stop strategy ought to have worked very much to his advantage. clearly Williams have done a lot of homework. There've been a lot of criticisms about how they've approached races in the past. They've certainly lost, I know, 3 races where Benetton had 3 stops and Damon Hill, or David Coulthard for that matter, were only on 2. They got with the programme and they did a great job. So Martin Brundle down in 5th place. Nice clear road ahead of him. Coming down the Jones Straight. Up to this very quick little flick. That's where we saw Barrichello lose position to Mika Häkkinen earlier in the race. Häkkinen currently 3rd, Barrichello 4th, Martin Brundle 5th.
Yeah, sorry, Häkkinen losing quite a lot of time at the moment, while Mansell, race leader and 1992 world champion, is in the pits for another stop on the end of lap 54. Mansell is in the pits with Gerhard Berger now being the leader of this Australian Grand Prix.
Well, Mansell, just what I want to watch, both to Allard and to David Coulthard sitting with us, is are there any signs of fatigue or tiredness in Nigel Mansell? And a quick way of telling that is the angle a driver's head is at. If he's tired, his head will be tilted back. If he's a racer and he's still fit and strong, his head will be forward. So that's something to look out for with Nigel Mansell back in 2nd place after that 2nd and final pit stop this year's Adelaide Grand Prix.
Nigel Mansell's lap, a 1:35.995. That is comparable to a Lazy's pit stop, a little quicker than his previous pit stop, a 2nd to be exact. So he might have taken on a little less fuel actually, because there's less laps to go, I think. So where is Gerhard Berger, and is the Ferrari team ready for a pit stop for the Austrian? Yes, they are, John, are they? You can see it better than me.
Yes, Ferrari are ready, and again the tyres just being prepared, just been taken out from the tyre warmers.
Penalty for Rubens Barrichello, 10 seconds. Now that would be a stop and go penalty for speeding in the pit lane. Whoop.
Well, he didn't keep his finger on the button long enough, or maybe there was a problem with the button, it didn't react. But that is the price for exceeding the 80 kilometer speed in the pit lane. 10 seconds, stop and go. And that's going to really hurt Barrichello, because that is going to put him right now very close to certainly 6th place, if not out of the points.
Well, then out of the points already as well is teammate Eddie Irvine, who we saw very early on retiring with a very smoky engine.
Yes, he came down the straight, appeared to lose control, but in fact what had happened was he put the brakes on at the same time as the engine launched itself, and fluids, oil and water got onto the rear brakes. He spun round, and Eddie Irvine completely innocent of the charge.
I think Gerhard Berger should go and make his pit stop now, and he does have a chance to get out onto the circuit before Nigel Mansell. Currently his lead is 19.1 seconds, but no, he's decided to go for another lap.
And at the head of the pit exit of the Jordan team, 3 mechanics with a jack, an air bottle for the starter, and an additional worker there, because in 10 seconds, or not in 10 seconds, for 10 seconds, Rubens Barrichello is going to have to remain stationary.
Barrichello 5.715 behind Häkkinen he was, but he's going to be behind Martin Brundle and maybe even behind Oliver Panis by the time he can rejoin the Australian Grand Prix in Adelaide. Berger leads Mansell by 19.455 seconds. Is that enough for Gerhard Berger to make a pit stop and keep the lead of the race? I don't know whether it is, David. We're sort of questioning me. Are we... is the gap Gerhard Berger has big enough? I don't know. I think it's just about. It's close. It's going to be very.
It's going to be a very close call, because Berger's 19.5 seconds now into the pit lane. So once Berger enters the pit lane, that white line has got to maintain a maximum 80 kilometers per hour, all the way down, just over halfway down to the Ferrari pits. Now Ferrari are normally very sharp indeed, in and out. Practice pit stops, fuel out 6-7 seconds. But Berger, we have to watch for Nigel Mansell, and Mansell is still not. Well, here he is on pit lane now, and Berger is in the lead.
Gerhard Berger with a very good pit stop, 33.688, and there is Nigel Mansell right behind him. Nigel Mansell is right behind Gerhard Berger. We got a real motor race going on for this year Australian Grand Prix. Okay, it's not the World Championship title contenders. That's been sorted out in this right-hander by Michael Schumacher, but it's Gerhard Berger and Nigel Mansell.
Well, this is going to be a battle between a rock and a hard place, because clearly Gerhard Berger is not going to let Nigel Mansell get past without a titanic or Teutonic battle. I'm not quite sure which it'll be, but that Ferrari is quick in the straight line. The Williams and Mansell are quicker, arguably in a lap. Mansell is going to want to win this Grand Prix, just to sort of say, well, I knew I had it in me.
Oh, and he's going for it. Oh, they go. Dear, oh dear, oh dear. I thought they were going to hit for a moment there. Well, Nigel Mansell from a long way back.
Yes, indeed, but Nigel also was clever enough to know that he could go so far but no further, because he knew that Gerhard wasn't going to yield. Now, Mansell has got to find somewhere on the track. You know, he wasn't even close enough to. He put his car in position. Gerhard stayed far enough to the left that if Mansell was over-braking and not going to make it, to let Mansell cut across the front of Berger, and then Berger drive behind Mansell. But he didn't have to do that. Both got round the corner without problem, without contact. And this battle for the lead of the Adelaide Grand Prix. Sensational, Adelaide, and sensational is the word that one has to use about the outcome of the World Championship here. The battle that went on between Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill, as we sadly see Rubens Barrichello being chastised for exceeding the speed limit. 10 seconds of a stationary stop.
So there's Rubens Barrichello in the pits. Gerhard Berger, many believe, John, that he's the guy that drove the best race of the season in Monza after that very high-speed accident during the morning warm-up, and then on his way to second place. Actually, when David retired on the last lap of the Grand Prix, oh, he didn't retire, but you stopped anyway.
Well, Gerhard is made of something special. I mean, all these Austrians we've seen, Jochen Rindt, Niki Lauda, many, many more, they've got a particular spirit and an approach to life, apart from being fantastic race drivers.
So Gerhard Berger leads Nigel Mansell at the end of lap 59 by 1.13 seconds, and Gerhard's, I think, realized he can win this, while Mika Häkkinen's also exceeded. Now I wonder, have the teams been told that it's an 80-kilometer speed limit, John?
Very much so, because it would have been told to the teams. Certainly they'd have been notified, it would have been in writing, they would have had to sign a document saying that they have accepted the information. But you know, sometimes a driver, he might be too keen. As he comes down towards the end of the pit lane, he might lift, I don't know. But two drivers battling in the top six, both now in line. Barrichello's had his stop-go penalty. Mika Häkkinen on his way in to serve his 10-second sentence.
That would probably elevate Martin Brundle into third position. Just about, I think.
I think it would do, because the amount of time that it will take for Häkkinen to come in and make his way down the pit lane at 80 kilometers per hour, wait for those 10 seconds, then get back out, is greater than the time between Häkkinen and Brundle. So I would suggest that Martin Brundle could be on track for a third place podium place.
Something went on with that Ferrari of Jean Alesi that couldn't look like an air hose that was stuck in the cockpit or something.
And the McLaren team, they're sprinting their way down to the pit lane exit. McLaren team sending down 4 engineers. And that 10-second board sitting there waiting to welcome Mika Häkkinen. And those 10 seconds, well, I never had to face it because I was always a very good boy, but I can imagine it's like 10 minutes of getting derisive looks from everybody in the Eurosport commentary booth for that comment. But you know, you've got to be professional 100% all the time.
Gerhard Berger going on to Brabham Straight. where top speeds XC are something in the region of just over 230 kilometers an hour. And Mansell, no way.
Again,
this could be a good battle, actually.
Well, it is a great battle, but what happens is also that camera at the end of the straight, looking up the straight, tends to foreshorten the view that we're getting. So from the cockpit, Mansell and Berger are not as close as the camera illustrates, but nonetheless an intriguing and enthralling battle between these two, well, almost senior statesmen, certainly vastly experienced Formula One drivers.
Mansell getting closer to Gerhard Berger. The gap now 0.6 of a second. And I think Mansell has got 20 laps to find a way past the number 28 Ferrari.
You know, Nigel Mansell sat for the entire race until the last lap behind Jean Alesi. He's now trapped behind Gerhard Berger, and he doesn't know by the time this race is finished how to get past a Ferrari, because for one thing, Mansell will know more about the strengths and weaknesses of that car than anybody else in the grid.
For McLaren, Peugeot engineers or mechanics waiting at the end of the pit lane. Also, team manager Dave Ryan is down there. So 5 people awaiting Mika Hakkinen, who did not come in on this lap, and Nigel Mansell now only 0.3 of a second behind Gerhard Berger. He's making inroads.
But what Gerhard Berger, I think, is very cleverly doing is using his strengths, which are on the straight, and marginalizing his disadvantages, so he slows Mansell down deliberately, more than he needs to do for himself. Then Mansell's off the throttle when Berger gets back on it. So the seesaw effect we're seeing, I think Berger's just trying to destabilize, make Mansell feel uncomfortable, make him get out of the rhythm that clearly, could Mansell get past Berger, would see him pull away.
Well, David's first visit to the Australian Grand Prix must have been good so far.
Well, yeah, I think this has been the best Grand Prix of the season so far, as you see Hakkinen coming in for his 10-second stop-go penalty for speeding in the pit lane. But, you know, as you see now, although we lost the battle for the World Championship, we now have a fantastic battle between Gerhard and Nigel.
And Hakkinen, 2 seconds, 1-0, and off he goes. He is just ahead of teammate Martin Brundle. I'm not sure, did he pass the... Oh, he passed the line before, so we got to wait. I think Brundle's ahead of Hakkinen, actually. We wait for confirmation at the end of lap 63, but I'm pretty sure Gerhard Berger, Nigel Mansell and Martin Brundle is the top 3 in this Grand Prix.
Well, David Coulthard, you have driven many Grand Prix in this car. Looking at Nigel Mansell, can you see any signs of fatigue, or do you think the guy is completely physically on top of the situation?
Well, I don't think it's possible after 63 laps to be absolutely on top of the situation. I'm sure he's hot, he'll be tired, he'll probably be having a drink from his drinks bottle as he goes along the straight. And but you've got to say, though, he's still maintaining the lap time. He's been fairly consistent in the mid-118s for the last few laps.
Now you've had to race with Gerhard Berger and Jean Alesi many times this year. What's it like being behind a Ferrari, and what have you got to do to get ahead of a Ferrari?
Well, John, anytime I've been behind a Ferrari, he's made a mistake, but he's just held on to it there, and he's in behind Nigel.
He made an error. He caught the same curve that Mark Blundell did, just trying to find that extra inch of track, and like Mark Blundell earlier in the race, was pulled off. Now, very fortunate indeed, because he looked to be going somewhat quicker than Blundell was doing, and he just got the car away from contact to the wall. Let's look again. Berger, you can see there, up the curb, and once that happens, you are in big time trouble.
Gerhard actually held that together pretty well. I mean, he did not lose a lot of time during that little incident. There we see it again from Nigel Mansell's car. Gerhard going straight on. Very good. As John Watson has said before this race, this ain't over until you pass that man with the black and white, the checkered flag.
And there's still a lot of racing to go. We're lap 65, and there are battles not just at the lead here. Mansell retaking it after a very clear error from Gerhard Berger, just being too greedy, coming down the Jones straight, getting too far to the left, catching that curb, and being drawn off the track. Mansell must have almost again been laughing in his balaclava helmet. That has taken the pressure away from Mansell, because he is, I'm sure, certain that in the course of a lap, his lap time is quicker than that of Gerhard Berger. The only downside for Mansell is that Berger appears to have the quicker car of the two down that straight, and should Mansell get caught behind traffic, because they're lapping the tail enders, there are 14 cars running on lap 65, that will just open the opportunity once more for Gerhard Berger to put himself under the rear wing of Mansell's Williams, and maybe put his heart in his mouth and go for the oh-so-late braking at the end of the straight.
1.618 seconds, the gap between Nigel Mansell and Gerhard Berger. We're on lap 66 of the Australian Grand Prix, the last Grand Prix of the 1994 Grand Prix season, which Michael Schumacher was leading from the start. He went off the circuit, then drove Damon Hill off the circuit, so that got the World Championship out of the way. Rubens Barrichello is in 5th. He fell back because of a 10-second stop-and-go penalty. He's 0.6 behind Mika Häkkinen, who also fell back because of a stop-and-go penalty. Martin Brundle is in 3rd, and all of the top 3 were born in the 50s.
And Alan, I think we're going to see a little battle here for 3rd place, because Mika Häkkinen is running down Martin Brundle in 3rd place, and he's dragging Rubens Barrichello along with him. And it's only going to be in the next 4 or 5 laps that we will have the 2 Marlboro McLaren Peugeots and the Sassel Jordan Hart joining battle in the closing laps of this year's Grand Prix.
Mansell and Berger are lapping 120, 119. Häkkinen's actually the fastest driver out on the circuit at the moment, together with Nigel Mansell and Berger. So, well, here's my favorite camera shots. Thank you very much. In the distance, you see the back of Mika Häkkinen's car. Ooh, late on the brakes, Barrichello, ever so late.
Indeed, and change of engines for the Jordan team. They're going to have the V10 Peugeot engine that Mika Häkkinen has. McLaren, of course, moving on to the Mercedes-Benz V10 engine built by Ilmor back in the UK. That's the engine that the Sauber team have used for the past 2 years. They're moving on to the factory Ford Z-Tech, whatever the version of that 3-litre engine that Ford will produce. So it's a year in which an enormous amount of change, and also, you know, the number of drivers. Alan mentioned it this morning, some 48 drivers have competed in 16 Grand Prix this year. I don't remember as many driver changes as that, and I have to say there are not, in my opinion, 48 drivers worthy of the title of Grand Prix driver. Luckily, one of them's in the booth with us here.
Yeah, there's one with us, David Coulthard, who I am sure will find a seat with a Grand Prix team in 1995. Sorry. Will it be this car? Will it be red and white? Who knows what colour it's going to be, but I'm sure David will be in one of them.
I certainly hope so.
Yes.
Is that all the comment we're going to get, David, on that issue?
That's all I know at the moment, that hopefully I'll be in a car next year.
Good. Well, race leader Nigel Mansell, lap 68. 1.5 seconds, Gerhard Berger behind in second place. And a massive amount, 39 or 40 seconds, until we get to Martin Brundle. But Häkkinen in 4th and Barrichello in 5th are hunting Martin Brundle down.
Well, some cars sound fairly sick passing our commentary booth. Martin Brundle is still in 3rd and Häkkinen is 4th. Someone spun off there. So it looked like a Tyrrell, so that could well be Mark Blundell. Yes, it is, and damage.
Yes, and that looks very much as if Mark Blundell's race is over. He was in battle with Heinz-Harald Frentzen. So maybe contact between the Sauber and the Tyrrell. So whether Frentzen can make it back or continue, at the end of this, that information will come up.
18.5, 18.5. The gap remains the same between Mansell and Berger at the end of lap 68. Nigel Mansell, 184 Grand Prix starts. He had before today, he'd never won the Australian Grand Prix. He did win the 1992 World Championship. Gerhard Berger in the number 28 Ferrari, the man that lives in Monaco, is starting his 163rd Grand Prix. He's third in the World Championship and he won the German Grand Prix. And that was the first Grand Prix victory for nearly 4 years for Ferrari.
And the battle here in Adelaide is not over yet. There is traffic all round the circuit. Mansell's got a comfortable 1.5 second lead. Should be sufficient that traffic won't affect his race lead. But you know, it just depends where you catch it.
I've got a feeling that Martin Brundle's engine does not sound all that good anymore. I'll wait for another lap and have a look, because there's one car around that group where Brundle is driving that's got a fairly sick engine note.
Well, we can see that Frentzen is still running as race leader comes up to put a lap on the young German, who will once again lead the Sauber with Ford engines in 1995. As Nigel Mansell looking for a little bit of help and cooperation. He does not want to get trapped. This is what I was talking about a few moments ago. Gerhard Berger has got to capitalise, because through these twists and turns of Adelaide, Mansell is losing time. And it's only when they now get onto the Jones Straight, just following round. Here we are. And now, can Mansell get past? No way. Frentzen is not helping Mansell one little bit.
The car that does not sound good is one of the Ford-engined Minardis of Pierluigi Martini.
And Frentzen again just cuts across Gerhard Berger. Now that is not particularly good. In fact, it's very bad from Frentzen. He's well out of contention. He's in 7th place. The gap between himself and Olivier Panis is still not showing on screen, but he could have been much more helpful to Gerhard Berger in this battle for the lead. Now he can clearly see that Berger is behind. He doesn't need to be Einstein to work out that Berger is in 2nd place, and still not giving road or giving way. And the gap again, just you can see Mansell now has got the advantage. Frentzen doesn't think he's doing anything wrong, cuts across the front of Gerhard Berger. And if I was in the Ferrari team, I'd be down very quickly indeed to the Sauber pits and tell them to tell Frentzen to get out of the way.
Hans-Harald Frentzen lapping some 3 seconds a lap slower than Nigel Mansell, and Gerhard Berger is clearly holding up. The man in 2nd position, who is some 43 seconds ahead of the man in 3rd position, Martin Brundle. Tell you what, that Sauber is quick down the straight.
And Gerhard Berger being frustrated even further now. He's going to have to take a chance, go down. Frentzen, get out of the way!
I guess what might be happening here is Frentzen thinks that Gerhard is a lazy and he's fighting for the same position.
I think that's probably very true indeed, David Coulthard, but I have to think also that Frentzen is no dummy, and he can clearly tell the differences between the helmets of Berger. And look at Adelaide now, trying to become embroiled in the battle. And this is a case where if Frentzen does not get out of the way, there should be a penalty for this, because he is destroying the battle for the lead of this Grand Prix. As you pointed out, he does believe it is Jean Alesi. Berger left, right, Frentzen now get out of the way. Now Alesi, you see also, now he'll go to dive to the left.
Oof, lost it to Jean Alesi as well. Heinz-Harald Frentzen, that wasn't very clever.
Well, I have to say, Frentzen brought that upon himself. If he had used his head a little bit earlier in a lap, he could have let Gerhard Berger get through, and it wouldn't have affected his line. Now maybe Alesi ultimately would have passed him, but maybe it would have taken Alesi a little bit more time and a lot more work.
Mansell, Berger, Brundle, Hakkinen, Barrichello and Panis. That is the top 6, with Alesi in 7th, Frentzen in 8th, 9th Christian Fittipaldi, and 10th Pierluigi Martini. And still we have some 14 cars running with 10 laps to go. So 10 laps. Can Gerhard Berger catch Nigel Mansell to win his third Australian Grand Prix? We'll find out after the break here on Eurosport.
Mansell ahead now, 4.5 seconds behind there. There are only 9 laps to run, and that's looking like a tall order for Gerhard Berger to try and pull back. And a lot of this gap has been precipitated by following Frentzen for just too long, when Frentzen would not let him by.
120,000 Australians and other nationalities are here to see this race, on top of the 210,000 who have already been here for the previous days.
Mika Häkkinen closing up visibly now on Martin Brundle ahead, and again the level of determination demonstrated by Häkkinen was shown with those plumes of black smoke coming out of the right-hand front wheel under braking for the hairpin. Have a look if you can next time around if we're on it, but it really is absolutely fascinating watching that go on.
Meantime, it really does look...
We are on lap 73. Nigel Mansell leads Gerhard Berger and Martin Brundle. Brundle is 2.6 seconds ahead of teammate Mika Häkkinen, who you could just see in the background there. Ahead of him is Oliver Panis.
As far as we were concerned...
Well, Damon back out to meet the world's press, the media, and express his bitter disappointment at the actions of Michael Schumacher, and that's something that he is going to, I'm sure, express in a fairly blunt language.
But I think I gave him a good run for his money, and he certainly was feeling the pressure because he ended up falling off the road.
Well, that's it, you couldn't really do any more than that, could you?
No, and I saw the opportunity, I thought I've got to go here, and then it didn't happen.
So in other words, you'd say that's sport, that's racing?
I'm afraid so. That's motor racing. I'm afraid that going into the last race with 1 point deficit to Michael is always going to be, unfortunately, putting you in the position where you've got everything to lose. Well, I couldn't win in that sort of situation, and I think I would want to say that everyone in the Williams team deserves some sort of medal this year, because we've been through a hell of a tough time, and to be here at least at the last race fighting to win the championship. And looking very strong, looking competitive. The Renault engine was strong, and the whole team were terrific, and I'd just like to say thanks to all of them this year, and we'll come back next year.
Great, thanks a lot.
Well, that was Damon Hill talking to Barry Sheen, great mate of Damon, incidentally. And John, I hope at home you heard it as good as we did here.
Well, Damon was certainly very gracious and didn't point the finger in a way which I feel he could have done at Michael Schumacher. Of course, having seen Schumacher go off, have contact with the wall, the other side of the coin would say was maybe Damon was a little bit too anxious to get past. But the fact remains that Michael Schumacher shut the door so firmly that it put Damon Hill in a position where he had nowhere to go. Contact was inevitable, and an unsatisfactory end to what turned up to that point out to be an absolutely enthralling and brilliant battle, certainly worthy of the title world champion, soured as a consequence of the way it actually ended up.
The gap between Nigel Mansell and Gerhard Berger now 2.9 seconds. Brundle is 2.5 seconds ahead of his teammate, but 44 seconds behind Gerhard Berger. Barrichello fifth, last person to score points, and the last driver to be on the same lap as race leader Nigel Mansell is Oliver Panis, but that won't be for long, I think.
And I would think Mansell will look to find a part of the circuit where he can overtake Olivier Panis cleanly, because this little battle going on, it isn't a battle for a position. Gerhard Berger in second place, Jean Elise in seventh. Elise having been off earlier, losing time in that spin. But Berger beginning to lose out in this battle. Mansell still fit and strong, 2.5 seconds in the lead.
We can see from our commentary booth here, one of the Minardis is blown up and stopped on the start-finish line and parked against the pit wall.
Well, thanks, David, for standing up and showing that. Anyway, there's photographers going to be ready for the celebrations, but we still have a race to run. We're on lap 76. 81 laps in total is this Grand Prix long. Nigel Mansell leads Gerhard Berger at the end of lap 75 by 2.569 seconds. That is going to be less by the end of the next lap, I think. Well, also Brundle and Häkkinen are at it at the moment, so not many laps to go, but it's going to be a thrilling end to this Grand Prix.
And Rubens Barrichello running behind the two McLarens, dropping back, not able to maintain the pace that Mika Häkkinen has forced Martin Brundle into. And in fact, those two are actually getting gradually closer to second place man Gerhard Berger.
Mansell is saying, I am fit, lap 76, 1:18.7. That is a quick time when you've done nearly a whole race with 5 laps to go. I mean, no doubt about it.
And clearly Mansell now very much in control of this Grand Prix. And of course, with the prospect of the checkered flag, some few laps down the road, the revival, the sense of achievement, and he will be very, very proud indeed, and every reason to be so. And there, Frank Williams, one of the few times we see a smile on his face. Sadness, of course, that his driver, Damon Hill, has not been successful in the World Championship, but delighted that his team, again, is the winner of the Manufacturers' Championship.
Well, his team won the Manufacturers' Championship. Mansell wins maybe his 4th Grand Prix of the season. It's his 4th Grand Prix, his first win, of course, and that's what he wanted. He wanted to leave Australia with a victory. So did Ian Harrison, who's going to run the touring car team. So does John Russell, his engineer, who's going with Ian Harrison to that touring car team indeed. So they're 3 happy chappies, very happy chappies.
Lap 78 and 3 after this. And the final outcome of Adelaide 94, sensational Adelaide, the 10th anniversary of a Grand Prix in the city. One more Grand Prix remaining, and then in 90, and a big shunt for one of the two McLarens. Mika Häkkinen has had heavy contact. Look at that left front, left rear, I think maybe off the car, certainly the rear wings off the car. Now, let's hope we can get a view of that again. There has been an onboard camera. That's been a heavy accident. Fortunately, those tire walls at the end of the escape route prevent any heavy contact with anything solid, but I would say Mika Häkkinen's just shocked as much as he might be winded. So, oh, there we see what happens. Oh, heavy impact. Spins round, nose and tail hit the wall. Mika Häkkinen comes to a rest safely. In safety. Here's the shot as we come down the straight, and it's here the quickest part of the straight. Whether is it under braking or just before he gets on the brakes, he has the problem. Oh, and so that was almost at 290 kilometers per hour.
Also, John, it looked very much like what happened yesterday to Mika, where it come to the end of the straight and the rear wheels seemed to lock because of an engine blowout.
Well, let's look at it again. It just appears that something with the locking wheel, right rear, dragged the car around. Heavy rear impact, lighter frontal impact. Mika now purely a passenger and out of the car, clearly disappointed. Fortunately, no injury whatsoever, and a very hard race that Mika, a battle for 3rd place with teammate Martin Brundle, and Barrichello now elevated to 4th place. Oliver Pennis in the first of the Ligiers, 5th. And John Alesi in the 2nd Ferrari in 6th.
Oliver Pennis moving out of the way for race leader Nigel Mansell, who has got 2 laps to go when we finish the next lap. There we see 2nd place man Gerhard Berger, who's got John Alesi, who is now 6th, right behind him. Pennis in 5th, scoring more points for the Ligier team, where Johnny Herbert will go and drive in 1995 again. The end of lap 79, 2 laps to go for Nigel Mansell. Well, David Coulthard, thanks very much for all your commentary during the last couple of Grand Prix when Nigel Mansell was in your car. He's going back to his garage and we will see him after the race. Well, Berger is now 1.7 seconds behind Mansell. And I think, John, bar a big mistake from Nigel, he's going to win this.
Yes, Gerhard Berger now behind Olivier Panis, and you can see the distance is almost 3/4 of the straight, and that's the gap between Mansell and Berger. Berger, I'm sure, now reconciled to a second place, and Panis looking in his mirror is really almost welcoming or wishing that Berger would come past, because he doesn't want to get in the way of this battle. Well, Berger still hadn't got enough ground on Panis to make it through. But Mansell now coming up to
John,
the completion of his 80th lap.
Sorry to interrupt, but Panis, of course, has got to realise that Alesi is behind Berger, and Alesi is actually fighting for position with Panis. So, similar situation that we had with Frentzen is now occurring with Panis.
Certainly was, but it did look like Panis was looking very hard in his mirrors. You know, this thing of drivers, how do they recognise? They recognise the cars clearly, but how do they recognise the drivers? Well, part of that is the driver's paint scheme, his individual sort of tattoo. The other things are the way the driver's head in the car sits. Some drivers have their head forward, some have it back, some lean a lot in corners, others don't. And it normally is quite easy to recognise which of the two drivers it is. In the case of the two Ferraris, I would have no doubt that it's no problem for Olivier Panis to recognise that it is Gerhard Berger, but he may have been smart enough to realise, and I'm sure if he wasn't, the Ligier Renault team are doing it for him. They're saying, be careful, because Alesi is right on Berger's gearbox.
Gerhard Berger falling back from Oliver Panis now, who's actually gaining again on Nigel Mansell. So, we are waiting Nigel Mansell. 2 left-hand corners, 2 right-hand corners to go for the 1992 World Champion, and a grandstand finish to his 4 races with the Williams Renault team. It's his 31st Grand Prix victory in his Grand Prix career. Nigel Mansell crosses the line, and that is some consolation for the Williams team, but they would have wanted to win the World Championship here today. For Damon Hill, they've won the Constructors' World Championship, they've won the Australian Grand Prix, so for the team, wasn't too bad a weekend.
Well, I think clearly the disappointment of the World Championship and how that title was actually solved will, for me, be one of those areas where it just added a further bad note to a year which we've seen so much tragedy and controversy. I had hoped that the battle would be won the way we saw it being fought out for those 34, 35 laps. To have it end like that, well, the record book will not say how it ended. They'll say Michael Schumacher is the world champion in '94. And there, a man who will be very pleased indeed with his day's work. Martin Brundle takes the final place on the podium. Williams team delighted with their win. I'm sure they're delighted that Nigel Mansell fulfilled the promise, not that only that Williams and Renault, but Bernie Eccleston, who was instrumental in the contribution to bringing Mansell back into these final 3 Grand Prix, as well as his earlier season's attempt in Manicourt. So the brilliant question now, look, Mansell, as he goes round the lap, more and more jubilant. And I mean, I must say, I'm very proud of this Englishman. He has done something which I think is quite remarkable. He is 41 years of age. He spent 2 years racing in Indy cars in America. He won their championship in 1993. 94 was a poor year. He came back into Formula One, into a car which is an entirely different type of car to drive. And it's not just the driving of the car, it's not just the single fast laps, it's the ability to use the car in racing conditions. And that is what took Mansell the time. But he has won this year's Australian Grand Prix, and he's achieved what he never achieved in the period when he was a full-time Grand Prix driver, and that is win here in Adelaide.
Point scorers here in sensational Adelaide. Mansell, Berger, Brundle, Barrichello, Panis and Alesi. Just losing out on the point, Heinz-Harald Frentzen, Christian Fittipaldi with a very sick-sounding engine, Martini, Leto, Lecourse and Häkkinen completed top 12, although Häkkinen, of course, wasn't running at the end of the race. Running are a lot of spectators here, while we look at the championship positions. 92 and 91, that stays the same. Berger 41, Häkkinen 26. But Brundle has overtaken quite a few people and pushed David Coulthard back to 8th in the Drivers' Championship. So we're going down to the people that have scored 1 point in this year's championship. Well, Mansell is going to do a two-point turn into that garage. The Constructors' Championship, Williams-Renault wins 15 points ahead of Benetton, Ford, Ferrari, McLaren and Jordan. That will be the garage alignment for all next year's Grand Prix. Congratulations Williams-Renault, congratulations Nigel Mansell, and of course congratulations Michael Schumacher for a very good year. He basically won this year's World Championship in the first 5-6 Grand Prix of the season.
Well, there you see delight on the face of Nigel Mansell and Gerhard Berger. First to congratulate him, Martin Brundle again, another Brit, 2 Brits on the podium. And I mean, that it's done so much, I'm quite sure, for many of the British drivers, that Nigel Mansell has come back, he's achieved his goal, he's won another Grand Prix. They will now make their way, hobbling a little bit, the old right foot from all the braking. Of course, on Formula One cars with carbon fiber brakes, you have to brake so late, unbelievable. And they're the greatest showman really we've seen in Formula One for many years. He knows how the crowd love him, but he knows how to respond to that.
Nigel Mansell making his way to the podium together with Gerhard Berger and Martin Brundle. Brundle 35 years of age, so is Gerhard Berger, and they're 6 years younger than Nigel Mansell.
Well, after a long, hard day's work, you'd think that the climb up to the podium would be no problem whatsoever, but those are weary arms and legs.
Well, John, just looking at Nigel Mansell, he was looking very fit still. I mean, I'm impressed with the way he looks. Look at him, jubilant on the rostrum. I mean, there's a man who wants a Formula One drive.
Not only that, look at the response from the thousands and thousands of people who've paid to come to Adelaide to see this Grand Prix. They are delighted with the result. The championship battle, the battle that was the focus point of this year's Adelaide Grand Prix, that's forgotten about. It's Nigel Mansell, Gerhard Berger, Martin Brundle, but it's all for Nigel Mansell.
Jubilant Nigel Mansell takes the trophy for winning this year's Australian Grand Prix. On the left is Gerhard Berger, on the right Martin Brundle, on the left, totally on the left in the blue and white actually, that is Williams team manager. That's the last time he'll be doing that. He can do it at touring car races as of next year. Ian Harrison, well done. Congratulations to everybody on the rostrum, everybody that have fought today.
But the cheers in Adelaide are for the 41-year-old Nigel Mansell. What a supreme performance. What a return to Formula One. And now, what are the Williams-Renault team going to do in 1995? Are they going to let Mansell go? Are they going to put Mansell and Damon Hill together, or is it going to be Damon Hill and David Coulthard? That's a decision, that's a real crunch decision, and one that I'm sure will be agony for somebody.
John, whatever they do, I think Nigel Mansell and Damon Hill will be a formidable team in 1995 with the Williams-Renault. Of course, they have to fight the Benetton Renault of Michael Schumacher and another, which is, as far as we know, still Jos Verstappen who will drive that second Benetton. Johnny Herbert will go back to Ligier, and I don't know who will. Panis, of course, will drive them, but we don't know what engines they're going to use yet.
Well, that's an undecided situation for Ligier. But look at Mansell, desperate to get his own back on Martin Brundle and Gerhard Berger. But look, pure joy on the face of a man who is synonymous with the public. Look, the masses here, they love what they've seen here today. In fact, for many people, that was the focal point of this year's Adelaide Grand Prix.
It's his first victory of the season, John. Whether it was IndyCars or Formula One.
And none will come sweeter than the one we've just witnessed here. Almost 2 hours in Adelaide.
A long, hard race, 81 laps.